Hi, in this video we're going to be having a look over the FY6900 waveform generator, signal generator, and we're going to do a bit of a how-to of how to use it, go through some various functions in it, just a bit of an intro of how to get going with it. If that's useful, stick around. In terms of turning the generator on and off, there's a soft power button here. One tap to turn on, one tap to turn off. But don't get caught out that that's the only switch, because you've actually got a real physical switch at the back. So if obviously that's turned off, then the soft button on the front's not going to turn on, so that can be a trap for new people. Okay, first things first, in terms of the user interface, it tends to all start with either picking a channel or one of these function buttons, and then you generally work into some more like lower level detail that you want to control based on the function that you're working in with these buttons. And then finally you're going to be using this knob and these buttons to adjust. So for example, if I want to pick the waveform, I might pick wave, and I could keep pushing the button like that, but it also means that I can just use this wheel to scroll left or right to pick the wave that I want. And the same sort of thing happens when if we want to do more detail with a wave. As I said before, you pick a function, then you go into the details. So maybe I want to adjust the frequency, so you have little prompts here for what the buttons are going to be. So I click the frequency, and then I would then again use the wheel to adjust the number. And you can see here that it's sort of stuck on a particular decimal place. The way you switch between those is you use these arrows, so that way you can get to the area that you want to change. And it would be the same if I was working with amplitude or any of those others as well. I can flick to the decimal place using the buttons and then use the wheel to change the number. If you wind the wheel around, you will see things count up in the next decimal place up, so it doesn't mean you have to use the arrows all the time, but definitely you will need to use them to get to the kind of the range that you're wanting to work in. Now, to get any signals from this generator to something else like an oscilloscope, it has these B and C connectors for connecting outputs, and this one for an input. And my one came with two different cables. The first one, it was a BNC to BNC, which you can plug straight onto the scope, and then this one here had some alligator clips at one end and the BNC connector at the other. And this is just a simple case of like, put it on, give it a twist, pick where you want it to go. So I'm going to go to channel 1 of my scope and plug it on. And you can see there's like a colored marking here, blue, and a yellow marking around here, and same with the yellow and blue there. So when you're looking at the user interface, yellow is channel 1, which is this left hand one, and blue is channel 2, which is the, I guess, the middle one or the right hand one in terms of outputs. And that way you know what you're working with on the user interface in terms of which output you're going to have your signal come out on. Okay, so let's start. First thing we've got here, I'm going to turn off my blue line on my scope. So I've got it hooked up to channel 1 on my scope, which also happens to be yellow in this case. And let's see if we can get something going. So the first thing we would need to do is we will push channel 1 to say that we want to work with channel 1. And then the next thing we want to see is, okay, we want this channel 1 to be on, not off. So I'm getting a flat line because I'm off at the moment. So to get that turned on, what you do is you push the channel button again, and that will toggle the on and off for that channel. Same for channel 2. So now I've got something up on my scope. First setting that we can play with, so we can pick the wave button, and I'm just going to vary the frequency of this, the measurement frequency of a scope here. So okay, we've got a square wave going on. So if we want to change our shape of our wave to something else, we push the wave button, which will take it to be working on this top section, which is the wave type, and then we can vary the wave by turning the knob. So triangle, ramp, negative ramp, etc. So that's how we vary our wave shape. I'm just going to go back to a boring old sine wave now, which we've got. So the next adjustment, okay, the wave button we can choose with the wave, but then anything else that we want to do under channel 1, we go to these next level buttons, and let's work with frequency now. So frequency is the top button. I'll push that. You'll see that the highlighted line changes down to where the frequency is, and then I can adjust the frequency up and down. So if I move these up and down like this, we can see on the oscilloscope things getting narrower or less based on me messing with the frequency there. And again, I'm mentioned that you can do your fine adjustment or your more coarse adjustment by picking which decimal place you want to work with, and then using these buttons, and then work the wheel to adjust the value. Now there is a trick to the frequency function of this that can catch you out. So you can see, if we zoom in here a little bit, we've got the decimal point here, right? So if I pick 10 here, you might think just naturally, oh, 10 hertz, right? But if I go and have a look at this on the scope, it's actually 10 kilohertz. So as you can see here, there is kilohertz written on the end of this. So everything in here is kilohertz all of the time. So just be aware of that and pick your right decimal place accordingly. Right, let's move on to amplitude. So this controls the size of the wave. So if I move this up and down, you'll see the impact on the scope. Changes the amplitude of the wave. But you'll also note here there is another trap. So here it says 5 volts, right? On my scope, it's currently showing 55 volts. Now that is not really what's happening, but because my scope is expecting me to use a ×10 probe, even though I'm getting about 5 volts out of here, the scope doesn't think so. So it's just something to bear in mind. One way around that is, instead of using the BNC to BNC connector, you can use your standard scope probe, hook that up to your scope as normal, make sure it's already been calibrated, and then use the alligator clip version of the cabling, plug that on, get the ground of the scope on the black lead, then hook the red one onto your scope probe, and now if I adjust the thing here, so I've got, what does it say, about 5 volts peak to peak, and it's about set for 5 volts, and if I do like, I don't know, 2 volts peak to peak, it should be closer to 2 volts peak to peak. Alright, so then the next item down in our buttons here is offset. So this one here will adjust this offset voltage, which is the height, I guess you could say, the plus or minus of the waveform. So let me just show you what I mean. If I turn the knob on that, you'll see that my sine wave goes up, and if I turn the other way, it goes down. Now there's not a lot of adjustment in this. It really, I think it's maybe about a volt plus and a volt minus, maybe a bit more. But that's what that function does. And you can see it looks like it's moving left and right, but that's just because of the triggering point in my scope. As I change the trigger point, this moves left and right, but now because that sine wave's going up, the trigger point's hitting in a different way. So it's not changing the phase or anything, it's really just changing that offset voltage. Okay, the next option is phase, but we can't really see that very easily because, again, the scope has a triggering point here. So what I will do now is I'll show you how to get a second, the second channel going. And just as a reminder, pretty much it works the same way as channel 1. So if I push channel 2, you'll see the blue part will jump to the top, and now we're working with channel 2. And of course we have to plug this in and wire it up to wherever as well, so I'm going to do that and not make you watch that bit. So again, we turn on channel 2 the same way as channel 1, where you push the button again and then it goes on. And now we have our 2 channels together, and you can see this one is set for sine, and channel 1 was also set for sine. And if you look at it, the peak of the sine waves is pretty much in the same spot. But what we can do with the phase button is we can shift it left or right. So as I change the phase angle here, you'll see I'm slowly moving the position of the channel 2 waveform so that the peak is in a different spot here. And once I get to about 180 degrees, because a full cycle is going to be 360 degrees, now the peak of channel 2 is at the trough of channel 1, because we're 180 degrees out of phase. And you can use the phase to adjust the channel 1 as well. That works exactly the same way. Okay, the next function that we'll take a look at is the sweep function. So to get to that, you push the sweep button. And then this allows you to do sort of different types of changes over a period of time. So for example, we could vary the frequency by selecting the object to pick frequency, or if I wanted amplitude modulation, I'll click the button one more time and it'll be amplitude modulation. And then I could say the starting and end point. So maybe I want it to go up to 4.5 volts from near zero, which I can get to by pushing this button again. That's how you get between those two. And then I want that to cycle over 5 seconds, and I want it to change in a linear fashion. I could have done logarithmic. And then I have the option to, in the direction, to say either go backwards, forward, or to cycle back and forward, which is what I'm going to do. So here we can see nothing's changing yet, because I actually have to read this OK to begin. So if I push OK, now we can see our amplitude is going up and down. And it basically works the same way for frequency as well, so you can do pretty cool things with that. I've covered a little bit the modulation button, so I'm not going to go into that again, but there's an example of that in this other video that I'll link in, where I'm using that to send a signal to my radio control truck. So let's have a look at the last thing which I'm going to cover in this video, which is the counter function. So this button here actually is related to this counter BNC connector, and this one takes something as an input, and it basically gives you some detail about what frequency is coming in. Right, so to set it up, I'm going to unplug the other BNC connector. I'm going to use this one to go onto the counter, and then I do have a single channel signal generator function from this oscilloscope, which I'm going to use for that. So I'm going to plug onto that and turn the signal gen on this on. It's not as capable, obviously, as this unit, which is why I got the FY6900. But if in my signal gen, I set up something to produce a 2 kilohertz wave and turn that on, you can see with the counter function, that it will show, okay, yes, I see that there's a 2000 hertz wave coming in and some of the details about it. If I was to do something like change to a different type of wave, the counter is really just looking for the basics of the signal, so it doesn't tell you that it's a square wave, but you can still see the frequency is 2 kilohertz. And if I change the frequency of that wave, let's go to 3.7, it will say 3.7. Okay, so that's a bit of an intro to a lot of the functionality of the FY6900 waveform generator. Most other signal generators are going to have similar kind of functions, but hopefully this is a good intro if you've never used one before. Okay, thank you very much for watching.